Okay, students, I am discuss about today's class is exception handling. Okay, do you know what is exception handling? This is a very important topic in Java. That is exception handling. You know what is exception? Exception means error. You know error when you are writing a Java program. There is some error, inbuilt error or programmer error. Okay, this error how to handle? So in Java, there is a concept of exception handling. Okay, first thing is, what is exception? Okay, exception means an unwanted, unexpected event that disturb the normal flow of the program. That disturb the normal flow of the program is called exception. Okay, in the exception handling, one question is arise: how exception can be handled? How exception can be handled? How to handle that exception? Okay, very important. How to handle exception? Okay, exception handling. Exception handling do not mean repairing an exception. Exception handling do not mean repairing an exception. We have to define the alternative way to continue the rest of the program. To continue rest of the program normally. Means we have to define the alternative way. We have to define the alternative way to continue the rest of the program normally. This way of defining is nothing but exception handling. We have to define the alternative way to run that program. This is called exception handling. Okay. Example, what is the exception? That is checked exception. Exception are two types. In Java, exception are two types. First one is checked exception, second one is unchecked exception. Okay, first one is checked exception and second one is unchecked exception. What is checked exception? What is unchecked exception? First one is checked exception. Checked exception means the exception which are checked by the compiler. The exception which are checked by the compiler whether a programmer handling or not. Whether the programmer handling or not for smooth execution of program at runtime. Okay, smooth execution of program at runtime are called checked exception. Again I am saying, what is checked exception? The exception which are checked by the compiler. The exception which are checked by the compiler whether the programmer handling or not for smooth execution. Programmer handling or not for smooth execution of program at runtime. At runtime, not compile time. At runtime are called checked exception. Okay, that is called checked exception. Example, what are the examples of checked exception? There are many exception. It's called checked exception. I am defining two examples. That is hall ticket missing exception, and file not found exception. If file are not present in your hard disk, then that exception is called file not found exception. That is called checked exception. Another is called unchecked exception. What is unchecked exception? The exception which are not checked by the compiler. The exception which are not checked by the compiler whether the programmer handling or not for smooth execution of program at runtime. Unchecked exception means the exception which are not checked by the compiler. This part is very important. The program exception which are not checked by the compiler. This exception is called unchecked exception. Example, arithmetic exception and null pointer exception. What is two exceptions are there? I am writing two exceptions. Many exceptions of unchecked exceptions are there, but I am writing two exceptions: arithmetic exception and null pointer exception. Two exceptions I am writing. In exception hierarchy, throwable acts as a root for exception handling. Here I am writing throwable. In exception hierarchy, throwable acts as the root for exception handling. Throwable is the root, then childs are exception and error. Throwable is the root and childs are exception and error. Okay. Then again, exception handling is many ways. That is one way, customized exception handling. You know what is customized exception handling? Customized exception handling. We have to write customized exception handling by try, catch and finally block. Customized exception handling, try, catch and finally block. What is the meaning of try, catch and finally block? If you identify there is some exception, so if identify there is some exception, we have to write in try and catch block. If there is an exception, we have to write in try block. That exception can be handled by the catch block. Okay, and finally you can write any statement. Okay, here I am writing a code. Try if there is exception.